Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Wengan sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor of her grandmother's attic, the soft beams of the afternoon sun casting golden rays through the dusty window. Her fingers gently brushed through the items in the old wooden chest, a collection of curious objects, some familiar, others completely strange, left behind after her grandmother's passing. The attic smelled of time, of stories untold, of secrets woven into every trinket. Her grandmother had always been an enigma, a woman who spoke of magical lands and mythical creatures like they were real. Wengan used to think it was just her way of keeping the stories alive, but now, looking at the intricate objects laid out before her, she wasn't so sure. In the bottom of the chest, wrapped carefully in faded silk cloth, was a feather. Not just any feather, this one shimmered with an ethereal glow. The light bounced off its red and gold strands, which almost seemed to move on their own. Her breath caught in her throat as she carefully unwrapped the feather, feeling a strange warmth radiating from it. "What is this?" she whispered, almost afraid that speaking aloud might break the spell that had taken hold of her senses. The moment her fingers grazed the feather, soft edges, a surge of energy, coursed through her body. It wasn't just warmth, it was something more. Something ancient and powerful. She could feel her heartbeat syncing with the pulse of the feather as if it were alive. A soft hum filled the air, and suddenly the room around her began to shift. The attic's terrace walls rippled like water, bending and twisting. The chest disappeared. The floor gave way, and before she knew it, she was standing in the middle of an entirely different world. Wengan blinked in disbelief, her mouth falling open as she looked around. She was no longer in her grandmother's dusty attic, but in a vast, lush forest. Trees towered overhead, their leaves shimmering in colors she had never seen before, deep blues, vibrant purples, and glowing oranges. The air smelled different too, crisp, fresh, tinged with a faint hint of smoke, like a campfire burning in the distance. A soft, rustling sound came from behind her, and she turned quickly, clutching the feather tightly in her hand. Out of the bushes stepped a creature she had only ever seen in books, a fox, but not like any fox she had encountered before. This one stood on two legs, wearing a small cloak over its fur, its bright golden eyes locked onto her. So you've arrived," the fox said in a smooth, knowing voice. It was male, his tone calm but serious. "I was wondering when the feather would finally choose someone." When Enchanted stared at him, unable to find words for what was happening, the talking fox tilted his head and smiled slightly. "Indeed, be so surprised, girl. You're holding a piece of the phoenix after all. That feather, it's more powerful than you can imagine." Still stunned, Wengan managed to speak. "Galbel, who are you, and where am I?" The fox approached her slowly, his movements graceful. "I'm Yui, and you, Wengan, have just crossed over into the magical realm." His gaze fell to the feather in her hand, and that feather is the key to everything. Wengan's mind raced. Magic, a magical realm. This wasn't how possible. She had touched a feather, and now she was standing in a place that looked like something straight out of a dream. The rational part of her brain wanted to protest, to insist this was some kind of hallucination, but her heart told her otherwise. This felt too real. What does that mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. Yui's expression grew more serious. "The phoenix, a being of immense power, once roamed freely between this world and yours. Its feathers are more than just symbols. They carry the essence of the phoenix, magic, the power to restore balance or destroy it." Wengan swallowed, her eyes flicking down to the feather again. She hadn't realized she was clutching it so tightly. "So why do I have it? I don't know anything about magic or balance." "The feather chose you," you said simply. "For centuries, the phoenix has been missing, but its feather has always been a beacon, a signal to those worthy of protecting its power. You, Eastman, have been chosen to guard that power and to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hand." Wengan, as head spun, guard the power. She was just an ordinary girl. There was no way she could protect something so important. "There must be a mistake," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I am not special. I am just the one holding the feather," Yui interrupted gently. "There is no mistake. The phoenix never makes mistake." Before Wengan could protest further, Yu straightened, his ears twitching. "We need to move. It won't take long before others sense the feather's presence, and not all of them are as friendly as I am." Her heart raced. Others? What other? The ones who seek the phoenix's full power for their own selfish gain, Yui said, his tone darkening. There are those who would use it to bring chaos to bend both this world and yours to their will. We cannot let that happen. A cold shiver ran down Wang Ixin's spine. She had no idea how she was supposed to protect something so powerful. But before she could gather her thoughts, Yu was already moving, motioning for her to follow. Come on, he said, his voice urgent. We don't have much time. With her heart pounding in her chest, Wang Xin took a deep breath and followed Yu through the forest. The trees seemed to part as they moved, the leaves rustling with a soft, almost musical sound. Every step she took felt like it was pulling her deeper into a world she didn't understand, but there was no turning back now. As they walked, Yu explained more about the phoenix and its power. Long ago, the phoenix had been a guardian of balance between the magical realm and the human world. Its feathers contained the power of life and death, creation and destruction. But one day, the phoenix had vanished, leaving only its feathers behind as a way to preserve that balance. Without the phoenix, the balance has been fragile, Yui said, his eyes scanning the path ahead. There are those who seek to tip the scales in their favor, like Lord Hu. Lord Hu Wang Yangxin, repeated, unfamiliar with the name. A dark sorcerer, Yui explained grimly. He commands an army of followers, all of them hungry for power. If he gets his hands on the feather, well, let's just say the consequences would be catastrophic. Wang Yangxin's grip on the feather tightened. She didn't even want to think about what would happen if this Lord Hai found them. They continued their journey through the forest, and as the hours passed, Wang Ixin began to notice something changing. The air grew heavier, the sky darkening as if a storm were approaching. The leaves, once vibrant and full of life, now drooped and withered. An eerie silence settled over the forest. Yui's ears twitched, his eyes narrowing. We reclosed. Close to what? Wang Chen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The guardians of light, Yui replied. They were the ones who can help us protect the feather. Wang Xian's heart lifted slightly. Maybe this nightmare would be over soon. Maybe the guardians could take the feather and deal with all of this. She wasn't cut out for this kind of responsibility. But before they could reach the guardians, the air around them crackled with dark energy. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, cloaked in black, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Lord Yixiai's followers, Yui hissed, stepping in front of Wang Mixi. Stay behind me. The dark figures moved swiftly, surrounding them. There were too many. Wang Xian counted at least a dozen, all of them radiating the same menacing energy. Her pulse quickened, and fear gripping her chest. Give us the feather, one of the figures growled, its voice low and gravelly. And no one gets hurt. Wang Eng swallowed hard, clutching the feather even tighter. I can't. The figure snarled, stepping closer. You don't know what you were dealing with. Girl, hand it over. Yui stood his ground, his golden eyes gleaming with defiance. If you want the feather, you will have to get through me first. The dark figure lunged forward without warning, a crackling wave of black energy shooting from its outstretched hand. Yui reacted instantly, leaping into the air with a nimbleness Wang Yalklin hadn't thought possible for a creature his size. He spun in mid-air, his cloak billowing around him, and conjured a shield of shimmering light. The black energy smashed into the shield with a deafening roar, but Yui's same defenses held strong. Run, he barked over his shoulder at Wang Ixin. Her feet were frozen to the spot, panic flooding her mind. She couldn't outrun them. There were too many. What was she supposed to do? But before she could move, one of the dark figures broke away from the pack and charged directly toward her. Instinctively, she raised the feather in front of her as if it were a shield. A blazing surge of heat erupted from the feather, sending a pulse of golden light toward the figure. The force of it sent the cloaked attacker flying backward, crashing into a tree. Nexin gasped, staring down at the feather in her hand, now glowing fiercely. She hadn't meant to do that, hadn't her even known it was possible. But the moment she had raised the feather, something inside her had reacted, as if the feather itself knew what to do. You glanced at her, impressed, but still focused. Keep moving. I'll hold them off. He darted forward, launching himself into the fray with a ferocity Wang Yixin hadn't seen before. His small frame belied his power. He moved like a blur, striking at the dark figures with bursts of light and agile strike. The air was filled with the crackling of magic and the hiss of dark energy as the battle raged around them. Heart pounding, Wang Yangsen forced herself to run, sprinting toward the thick undergrowth on the edge of the clearing. She could hear Yui battling behind her, the clash of light and dark going in the distance. But she had to keep moving. She had to find the guardian. Branches whipped at her face as she pushed through the dense forest, her lungs burning with each breath. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to get away, had to keep the feather out of their hand. The forest seemed to close in around her, the once vibrant leaves now dull and lifeless. Every step felt heavier, the air growing thick with tension. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through her leg. She stumbled, falling to the ground with a gasp. Looking down, she saw a thin black thread of energy wrapped around her ankle, pulling her back toward the darkness. "No," she cried, trying to kick free. The figure that had attacked her earlier had recovered and was slowly reeling her in. The black thread tightening with each pull. Panic surged through her, and without thinking, she held the feather out again. The golden light flared to life, cutting through the black thread with ease. She scrambled to her feet, her leg throbbing but free. Before she could regain her balance, a shadow loomed over her. The figure had caught up, its eyes glowing with malevolent light. With a snarl, it reached for her, but just as its hand closed around her wrist, the forest erupted in light. A burst of brilliant white energy slammed into the figure, sending it flying backward. Rangising shielded her eyes from the brightness, squinting to see what had happened when the light faded. She saw them, the guardians of light. They stood at the edge of the clearing, their cloaks shimmering with golden energy. The leader, a tall, regal man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward, his hand still glowing from the spell he had cast. Behind him were a group of warriors, all radiating the same aura of strength and purity. "Are you all right?" the leader asked, his voice calm but commanding. And Yangsen nodded, still breathless, clutching the feather to her chest. I think so." The man's gaze softened slightly. "You must be Wang Yangsen. We've only been waiting for you." He extended his hand toward her, and for the first time since entering this strange world, Wang Yangsen felt a flicker of hope. She took his hand, allowing him to help her to her feet. "I am Master Qin," he introduced himself, his eyes scanning the darkened forest. "You've done well to make it this far. The feather is safe for now. But Lord Taimu's forces will stop at nothing to take it." Francine swallowed, still trying to catch her breath. "I don't understand why this is happening. Why did the feather choose me?" Master Antrim glanced at the feather, his expression thoughtful. "The phoenix-sized power chooses based on strength of character, not strength of magic. The feather sensed something in you, a heart capable of protecting its power. But the journey ahead will be difficult. Lord Hei is growing more powerful by the day, and the balance of our world is in greater danger than ever before." Before Wang Xing could respond, Yui appeared from the trees, his fur singed but otherwise unharmed. "You found them," he said, his tone light, despite the battle they had just endured. "Good timing, as always." Master Qin nodded. "We need to move quickly. Lord Hai wanted rest until he found the feather." The group moved swiftly through the forest, led by Master Qin and his warrior. The atmosphere was tense, but Wang Yangsen could feel the energy of the guardians radiating around her, offering some semblance of protection. As they traveled deeper into the magical realm, the scenery began to change. The once dark and oppressive forest gave way to rolling hills and sparkling rivers, the air becoming lighter, easier to breathe. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful to be real, and yet Wang Yuan to shake the feeling of dread creeping over her. Every step she took, every glance at the feather reminded her of the immense responsibility she now carried. This wasn't a dream, this was real, and the fate of 2 worlds rested in her hand. After what felt like hours of walking, they arrived at a large clearing where a massive stone structure loomed in the distance. The Temple of the Phoenix, it was breathtaking, its towering columns carved from shimmering crystal, glowing faintly in the fading light. The temple seemed to pulse with life, its presence a beacon of ancient power. "This is it," Master Kiran said, his voice hushed and reverent. "The Temple of the Phoenix, inside lies the secret to unlocking the Phoenix's full power." Wang Xin stared up at the temple, her heart racing. She could feel the feather vibrating in her hand, responding to the energy of the temple. This was where she was meant to be, but before she could take a step forward, The ground beneath them shook violently. "They were here," Yui growled, his fur bristling. From the shadows, Lord He's army emerged. Dark figures filled the clearing, their eyes glowing with the same sinister light. At their head stood Lord He himself, a tall, imposing figure clad in black armor, his face hidden behind a mask. His presence radiated malice, and the air around him seemed to ripple with dark energy. "Give me the feather, girl," Lord Hades' voice boomed, deep and cold, "or I will take it from your corpse." When Yingxen's grip on the feather tightened, she could feel its warmth, its power surging through her. But fear gripped her heart. How could she possibly stand against someone like Lord He? He was too powerful. Even the guardians seemed hesitant, their eyes flicking nervously between each other.
"You are going out to do this, you
But Wang Yingxen knew there was no other way. The phoenix had chosen her for a reason. She couldn't run from this. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I am not giving it to you," she said, her voice trembling but strong. Lord Hieselef echoed through the clearing. "Cold and cruel, you think you can defy me, child? You are nothing." The air crackled with tension as Lord He raised his hand, dark energy swirling around him. The ground beneath them trembled again, and Wang Linskin could feel the full weight of his power bearing down on her. But just as Lord He prepared to strike, the feather in Wang Eisena's hand flared to life, a brilliant blaze of golden light erupting from it. The light shot toward the temple, enveloping it in a radiant glow. The entire structure began to pulse with energy. For the first time, Wang Exen felt the presence of the phoenix, an ancient powerful force rising from within the temple. Lord Hife hesitated, his eyes narrowing as the temple began to awaken. Wang Xing could feel the phoenix sun power coursing through her, stronger than before, more alive than she had ever imagined. The final battle had begun.